I am Daniel Hughes, and welcome to Book 101. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years, and today I have my special guest. He's the author of several books, no other than Mr. Cody Engdahl. Hello, Mr. Cody.
Hello, Daniel. How you doing?
I'm fabulous like you. We gonna do the recap of the books that we talk about for the last 5 weeks.
Talked about quite a few.
Yes, Mr. Cody Engdahl is the grandson of Alexander Dumas.
At least in spirit, yes.
Yes, so let's talk about first the recap of the Rampage on the River.
Yeah, so Rampage on the River is my very first novel, and it's about friends that get separated from the at the beginning of the American Civil War, and they end up on opposite sides. Now they have separate adventures, but eventually their adventures will intertwine in which they have to work together. They were once friends, they're now enemies, and they have to work together to save someone very dear. All the while, all the real history of the Battle of Island Number 10 is taking place in the novel.
Yes, indeed. And the American Civil War was about slavery.
Yeah, that was actually my very first book. It was kind of a test book, and it was just a rebuttal to what's called the lost cause, where there are some people who want to say that the American Civil War was about everything but slavery. And so this is a very short book that explains why slavery was the primary cause of the war.
And Mexico, my love, your favorite.
Yeah, that was the last one I wrote. It was a prequel to the trilogy. It's a prequel to Rampage on the River. It's about the parents of the main character, Carl. It's how they meet, fall in love, run away together, and end up in the Mexican American War.
Yes, indeed. And the second favorite, The Perils of Fairville.
Yeah, the Perils of Perryville was the follow up to Rampage on the River. It continues Carl's story in the American Civil War. It has a lot to do with the consequences of what happened in the first book, and of course, we have it ends up with the Battle of Perryville, which is the bloodiest, largest battle known in history in the state of Kentucky.
Yes, definitely. And the last one that we talked about last week, Blood for Blood at Nashville.
Yeah, that book rounded up my Civil War trilogy, and so not Nashville. The Battle of Nashville was the final battle, or the final large scale battle in the Western theater. It pretty much ended the war in the West. And when we talk about the West, it's everything from the Appalachians and westward, and it also rounds up all the loose ends and the all the storylines that happened in the trilogy. It's really a revenge novel as well. It starts with a massacre at Fort Pillow and ends with the Battle of Nashville.
For all those books, Mr. Cody, which book you enjoy the most?
Oh wow, they're all special to me. I mean, they really are. It's like picking your favorite child. Mexico, My Love was the last one I did, and it was interesting for me because my first three books took place in the American Civil War, and I kind of got pegged as a Civil War author. But Mexico, My Love is a much bigger book. It starts in France. Uh, it goes into North Africa with the Franco-Moroccan War, and we got even pirates in it. And of course, it ends up with the Mexican-American War, mostly from the Mexican perspective. So that was the first book, novels, where I kind of got outside of the American Civil War and started exploring more of the the world history at the time.
Which book did you have difficulty of writing? The most
Uh,
difficulty.
the most difficulty, the one I'm writing right now.
Why is that?
Daniel, every book is a struggle, and if it ever got easy, then I think I would need to do something else. So, and we're going to talk about that with the book we're going to talk about today. But writing, sitting down writing a novel is a big task. It's a task that takes a daily commitment, and it takes resolution, because not every day is easy. Some days you sit down and the words just come floating out of you. Sometimes it takes you a week or so to get back to writing because you're stuck. So I struggled with all of them. I really did. But I persevered.
Yes, and they already published, and people reading it
Yes, sir. All over the world.
all over the world, people. So let's support Mr. Cody Engdahl if you are interested to listen more of those books, how Mr. Cody crafted it, the difficulties, and a lot more. So please do listen in our previous episode. So, Mr. Cody, what we gonna talk about today?
Well, now we're going to talk about your listeners, because I reckon that quite a few of them are not only readers but writers themselves. And so I wrote a short little guide. It's very inexpensive on Amazon, only $2 for the digital version of it, and I think the print is under $5. But I put together a little book called "How to Write, Publish, and Market Your Novel." A brief, no nonsense guide. And basically, what this book is just my method of how I go about writing novels. And I truly think that if you're someone listening right now, and you've always wanted to do this, you can. I completely think you can. And here are some steps, or how I went about doing it. Am I an expert? Well, I got four novels out already, and I'm writing my fifth. I'm someone who's done it, who's been on the path. So I think I have a lot of insight, especially for someone who needs that nudge.
Definitely. So, Mr. Cody, how did you deal with procrastinating?
Oh, well, I'll tell you something. There is writer's block is a real thing. and,
Definitely.
and it's really easy to procrastinate. There's a couple things I would say. First of all, I you got to find out what is the best time for you when you're the most creative. I find early in the morning works best for me. Some people it's at night. Some people it's in the afternoon. So you got to find that rhythm for yourself. For me, early morning, my mind is fresh, and I'm a morning person, so I like that. I I try to uh, write like at least 500 words a day. And here's the thing. There's a great book out there. Now I'm going to promote someone else's book, but I think it's Kate Goldberg's "Writing Down the Bones," and she said, if you read everything your favorite author has ever published, you're not reading 10% of that person's work, because most of it wound up in the trash. And so I think what trips a lot of people up, and myself too, is that you get this feeling that everything you write has to be perfect, has to be profound, and no, it doesn't. It has to be done. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. And so in her book, and I agree with this. She says just write, because the editing process is when you make it better. So when she says write down the bones, she means just get the story out of you, and it can be terrible. You could bad grammar, bad spelling. Don't fret about that, because that's why you go back and you rewrite and you edit and you polish it. It's writing a book is kind of like uh, carving a or sculpting something out of marble. You have this big raw piece of rock, which is your idea and the initial rough draft. Now you're gonna sand it down, and you're going to work it, and you're going to smooth out the edges until finally you have something that's readable.
Mr. Cody, this book you wrote in the middle of all your five books.
Yes. So I wrote this just before I put out my second book, and and basically what happened was, I when I was when I was uh, going through the editing and publishing of my first book, I to keep myself fluid, I was writing some articles, and I had a blog post, and in it I was writing articles about uh, just my method of how I went about writing my first book, and when I got done, I had a whole series of articles. And I said, this would actually would make instead of sitting on a blog that no one's ever going to read. I mean, I had some readers, but I thought this would actually make a pretty good book. So I took all those articles down off my blog, and I polished them up, and I reformatted them, and revised them, and edited them, and added some more, and put together I think a nice little guide. It's is it my bestseller? No, I mean, to tell you the truth, I'm more interested in selling my novels than stuff like this. But I think it can be a lot of help. And Daniel, the best thing that ever happened was I told people, like, hey, if you read this book and you write a novel and you get it published, let me know, because I would like to, I'd like to congratulate you. Well, I had a man get a hold of me, and he said, Mr. Engdahl, I read your book about writing, and I'm putting out my first book, and he had some questions. I said, yeah, absolutely. What would you like to know? I like coaching other authors. I have a few that I coach that I'm very proud of, that are publishing books and making their way. We're all on our path, right? So this is kind of my way of giving back, of helping other people do what I did.
A newbie, what are the procedure how to polish your writing?
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, I put together like a bunch of articles, and those articles are now the chapters of this book. So the first chapter is how to come up with an idea. Um, Second chapter is how to what kind of preparation before you sit down and writing. The third chapter is writing, how I go about doing that. The fourth chapter is what I called write to your reader and write to your reader, meaning write WRITE to your reader, and RIGHT, write to your reader. A little play on words there.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
The-
and then I have a chapter on editing, a chapter on publishing, chapter on marketing on Amazon, and social media marketing. I should, I should write a follow up, because I've learned a lot more since. But still, the advice I give in this is um, it holds up, because writing, storytelling is probably the one of the oldest professions in human history. We've been telling stories since we've been able to communicate with others, and so uh, there's all sorts of new technology and new ways, new platforms, and things like that. But the art of storytelling is still the same.
Definitely. But before we go on, Mr. Cody, I want to shout out to the people listening in Turkey. According to my analytics, in Istanbul, I get 49% audience share. Trabzon in 28%, Guayamashen at 9%, Gaziantep at 5%, Kokasalia 4%, Manisa 2%, Ankara 2%, Tiger Dog at 1%, and last but not the least, Balu at 1%. Thank you, Turkey, for supporting this podcast, because this podcast is created to empower writers all over the world, like Mr. Cody Engdahl.
I
Yes.
just like to say thank you, Turkey. I spent some time there, in Bodrum and in Istanbul. So great people, and great food.
Yes, we
Yeah,
we are inviting you people to go in Turkey, because it's one of a kind. They're hospitable people, and
yeah.
taste their food. It's one of a kind.
Yes, absolutely. I love Turkey. Great country.
So, Mr. Cody, how to write, publish, and market your novel? What are your struggles in writing with this book?
Yeah. So, basically, it was taking my struggles and turning it into helping others. And so, I think anybody struggling, this is a nice book to have on your shelf. Like I said, it's pretty cheap. Go to Amazon, check it out. And we go through all steps of the process, starting with like the idea. Where do you get your ideas from? uh, I like to say, let me actually, I'll turn to that page here. You know, first of all, I think the biggest struggle for people in writing is just sitting down and writing. And like me, I bet a lot of you out there have been saying, I would like to I'd like to write a book someday, and you just keep putting it off. And for me, I got to a point in my life where, like, I said, well, if I don't start writing now, I'm never going to start writing. So, so when you first decide to write a book, I think the first thing you need to do is come up with your idea. You don't have to have a complete book written in your head. And then sit down and just copy it out of your head. You can develop it as you go, but you want to have kind of a basic idea. So where do you get those from? The first thing you can look at is, what kind of books do you like to read yourself? What is it that you like? I think if you think about it, when you're going to write a book, you're going to be with this for about a year. Some people write fast; they get them done in 6 months, especially if they have an editor they pass it out to. So think about what you want to read. What is it that you like, and that's a good place to start. The second, you want to think about your audience. Uh, who are your readers out there? What are they used to? What kind of books do they like to read? A good way to do some of that research is looking on Amazon and looking at books that are similar to what you want to write, and see how well they're doing, and look at the reviews and see what people are saying about them. Um, I wrote about the American Civil War, so another part is for coming up with ideas is research is uh, how much resources are there out there. I was lucky because the American Civil War is written about quite a bit, so there's a lot of not only scholarly work but a lot of first person memoirs that I was able to read. And then finally, I would say, especially starting up with your first novel, you want to do something that's very familiar to you. For example, me, I'm from Detroit, and I was in the army. Man, I ended up in Nashville, so I wanted to do something that was similar about that, except in the American Civil War. My main character is from Detroit, gets in trouble, ends up in the army, and ends up at the Battle of Nashville. Uh, then I would say that once you get past the idea, and it can be a very basic one, you don't have to have everything thought out, but you do want to do a little preparation. Now, there are some people that say that they would like to do stream of thought. I think that's kind of lazy, maybe even arrogant. And I think no one wants to listen to someone just ramble on. I think the best stories out there are ones that have some forward thought to them. So you don't have to necessarily have everything perfectly outlined. But before I sit down, I think about, at least I write this down actually, is um, how do I want this book to begin? How do I want it to end? And what do I want to have happen in the middle? And that's kind of my basic outline. And then I start stringing together ideas and turning points in it, so that I'm writing to something. I'm not just sitting down and just letting the narrative go out. There are people that do that. There are people that do it quite successfully. I think George R. Martin is a famous pantser, gardener, as you put it. But a lot of people have criticized him for not being able to finish a series. We all saw how the television version of it ended. I think a lot of people were left unsatisfied. Knowing where you're going when you're writing helps you get there a lot better than not knowing where you're going. After that is the writing process, and A couple things is, first of all, I tell people to set an appointment. Like I try to get up and write first in the morning to get it, to get my daily writing done. You might not be able to write every day. You might have, work and family. Maybe it's just 2 hours on a Sunday, but if you just leave it to when you feel like it, you're never gonna feel like it, and and the further you get away from writing, the harder it is to get back to it. So I would say regular writing sessions. Daily is great, but if you can't, at least weekly, and make sure you hold yourself accountable for that. And then, I set goals. Like I know this doesn't sound like a lot, but I try to do 500 words a day. Well, it doesn't mean that I write, 497, 498, 499, 500. Whoo, I'm done. No, I try to at least write 500 words. Now, sometimes I write 537 words. Sometimes I end up writing, you know, 1,200 words. Sometimes I write 2,000 words. But if you're struggling with writer's block, and it's hard to get started if you have like big goals, like I'm gonna get 3,000 words done today. It's hard to get started when you're looking trying to climb a mountain like that. But if you tell yourself, I can do 500 words, that's not a lot. That's about a scene for me when I write. And sometimes you struggle to get through those 500 words, but once you get through it, your writing muscles are loose, and the words start flowing. So I think having small goals helps helps you move through it. And think about this, Daniel. If you wrote 500 words Monday through Friday, you would
Yes.
have 2,500 words at the end of the week. You would have, let's see, 5,000. Am I doing this right? Let's see. Yeah. You would have 5,000 words um, every 2 weeks. You'd have 10,000 words a month. You'd have 60,000 words in 6 months. That's a short novel right there. If you just had a small goal every day, you could do that. You could get it done. I'll tell you another thing that I do, and I can't remember. There's a name for this. I read about it based in a Japanese novel. It was a novel written by a Japanese man, but he explained this work cycle. Basically, I sit down to write. I set my timer for 90 minutes, and I don't do anything else. And when the timer goes off, I stop, and then I take a 20-minute break, and I do whatever I want to do. I surf the web. I take a nap. Have something to eat. Come
Yes.
back 90 minutes, and you'll be surprised how much work you get done when you have these focused things. Now, maybe 90 minutes is too long. I've also done 45-minute work cycles with 15-minute or 10-minute breaks.
Cody, how do you encourage yourself to write every day?
It's tough. I think getting it done early helps. One thing, this isn't in the book, but I started doing this, is I call it the next five things. So like on Sunday night, I like to do some outlining, and like I said, I start with a very basic outline, but the outline gets more detailed as we go. And so what I do on Sunday is I just try to think of what are the next five scenes in my book, and that way I know what I need to write each day. And I might change what those scenes are going to be, or add to them, or whatever. And sometimes I don't get through them all because a scene takes longer than um, it becomes more expansive than I thought it would be. But I think, once again, if you know what you're writing to, if you know what you're going to write, it's a little easier than just sitting in your chair and going, okay, what happens next? So, like in a non-writing session, it's almost as if like your your outlining is almost a separate task and separate session. Like sit down and like have a basic outline for your book, but then figure out what are the next five scenes that are going to happen. Do that on Sunday so that you can write those five scenes during the week. And I think that's a great way of keeping yourself moving forward.
Yes, indeed. You already wrote your book. It's already polished. Let's go to the publishing.
Yeah. So there's a lot of I'm an independent author, and I'm published through the KDP. I highly recommend that. Uh, there there are different ways you can go about it. Now, there's the traditional one, which I think is becoming less and less attractive to people. If you go through a traditional publisher, most of the big publishing house won't even talk to you unless you have an agent. So you have to shop your book around to an agent. Once you get an agent, then they're going to shop it around to publishers and hopefully get you a deal. That's one way to go. That can take you a lot of time. I decided I didn't want to wait. I didn't want to go through an agent. I wanted to get my first book out, do my own marketing, and start writing the next one. So I went through KDP on Amazon. There are other platforms. Amazon's the one I know. I think they're great. Now, if you're writing garbage and you're putting it on, you might not sell very well. So you still have to, or you're writing great stuff and you're not a great marketer, you might not sell very well. So you still got to do the work. But Amazon will walk you through. I put some of the steps of how to deal with Amazon and KDP and what are there's there's quite a few options when you're going through the steps of publishing through Amazon. I've also coached several people that are local to me that I've literally gone over to their house with my computer and sat down with them and walked them through how to get their books online. So that's my suggestion. We live in a golden age right now of uh, the independent creator. If you're a musician, you don't have to go to a multi-million-dollar studio. You can with a good computer and a good microphone and a mixer, you could create a pop hit right in your basement. You can write a book and publish it and sell it all over the world. You could start a YouTube channel and have a million people subscribe. I know YouTubers that are making over $100,000 a year from their
Yes.
basement, just talking about stuff. So yeah, I have more specifics in the book, but yeah, that's what I recommend.
Okay, so after you wrote your book, after you publish it, of course you want to market it.
Yes, yeah, and marketing, especially if you're independent. But I will say that even authors who are traditionally published through a publishing house, you still got to get out there and you still have to do the work. And one of the things I think is having a social media presence. The big ones are Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. YouTube's good. I think Instagram also is out there. I fear a lot of things going on TikTok. They call it book talk, but it's a way for people, because if you think about it, whatever book you're writing, there are millions of authors out there. There are millions of books out there. There's a lot of choices, and so I think that, especially if you write in a genre like I write in historical fiction, well, there's a lot of guys out there writing. So part of it is you got to be the brand yourself, because if people like you and they like you as a person and an author, they're going to come back and they're going to read your book 2, 3, and 4. So I would say, have a strong, uh, first of all, Facebook presence. First thing I did, because I used to be a TV reporter in Nashville, is when I started being on the air, I went to I cleaned out my social media. I took all references to anything political, anything to do with religion, anything controversial. I took it out, and I stepped away from arguing with people online. That's not gonna. It doesn't sell books. You might get some satisfaction of like owning people on the other side of the political divide, but you just lost a sale. So you want to be inoffensive and you want to be real. There's one of the things I did is I write the American Civil War. I have a trilogy in the American Civil War. So I went on Facebook and I found all uh, these groups and pages that are dedicated. Lots of Civil War roundtables and all sorts of groups. And so then I liked them and joined the groups, and I used those to market my book. So I would send put links and hey everybody, I just put out a new book about blah blah blah, and I've gotten some sales there. Now this is not my book, but I have started advertising on Meta, which is the company that owns Facebook and Instagram. That's worked out very well. Uh, I also have started doing ads on Amazon. I think before you have before you advertise on Facebook, you should probably start with Amazon because Amazon is very inexpensive. In fact, it's hard to spend a lot of money. And I'm going to give you a name. Anybody who wants to start advertising on Amazon, which is the first place you should advertise, you should take Brian Cohen's 5 day author ad profit challenge. It's free. I think if you look him up on it's Bryancohen. He every 90 days he does this 5 day challenge, and the gimmick is it's free because they're trying to get people to sign up for their paid course, but they say you don't ever have to sign up for our course. We're still gonna do this 5 day free one, and even Amazon uh, what's the word, endorses it because it's good. And I think I did the first 5 day challenge, and my royalties doubled, like my monthly average. So um, if you're going to write books and publish them, you got to think of yourself as not a starving artist, but a business person. And you got and like another great coach out there, David Gogren says you have to have the cold heart of a businessman out there. And so marketing is a big part of that. So there's a whole chapter on doing marketing and not only on Amazon but social media as well.
That'd be awesome, Mr. Cody. Yeah, once you wrote a book and publish it, I think you're already an entrepreneur,
Yes,
right?
absolutely. Yep.
Thinking about the business and you want to expand more, to write more books so that you can market it and you can be, let's say, your livelihood.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I find the more books you put out, obviously the more money you make. But like, for example, book once you put out book two and book three, book one sells more. So all the books like they sell each other. So it's great. So the more you put out, the your income just rises exponentially.
About your new book to come.
Yeah, so I'm writing a book. This is my fifth one. It's called The Prussian Prince, and it picks up our main character after the end of the Civil War trilogy, and he wants to go home to his wife because he realized he's been an absolute fool for leaving her to go off to the war. And when he gets home to Detroit, he has found, well, she's a German immigrant and she was carrying his child. So she went back to Prussia to give birth to their child because she wanted to be with her family. And so he's got to go back to Germany to be reunited with her. But he gets tricked into joining the Prussian army and ends up marching off to Austria in the Austro-Prussian War.
Sounds interesting. So, what is your timeline?
I got about 2/3 of it written on the rough the first draft. I'm hoping to have it finished by the end of this summer, and then we'll probably spend a couple months editing it and getting it right. So either by the end of this year or early next year is when this one will come out.
Yes, we are so excited for your upcoming novel, Mr. Cody. So before we go on, I'm inviting you to listen to my other podcast, Food 101, our third season, with Chef Alessandro, one of the best executive chef in one of the best restaurant in downtown Toronto. So please do listen, Food 101. So, Mr. Cody, can you please invite our listeners to buy all your books?
Yeah, if you I wrote these books to entertain the child inside of me that watched black and white Errol Flynn swashbuckler movies and loved romance and adventure and the age of honor and swords. And I really, the books are for adults, but if you got a kid that's mature and likes to read it, they can enjoy it too. I wrote for the inner child in us. I wanted to bring back that excitement I felt for adventure, but at the same time, to be true to the actual history. And it's such a joy writing these books because I do a lot of research beforehand and a lot of research as I'm writing, and I've learned so much, and I get more and more excited as I write because the overall series becomes more and more in focus for me. So, a good place to start is Rampage on the River, and especially I would say if you want to pick up my book on writing, I think there's a preview to Rampage on the River in it, but you could read my method of how I write, and then you could pick up Rampage on the River and see the end result of that. And I think that's a good place to start.
Definitely, people. So let's support again Mr. Cody. And I'm so very grateful that you being part of my podcast, Book 101 Review. And for your talents, thank you for sharing to us. And as
You.
the spirit of Mr. Alexander Duma, we hope that you're gonna write more books like him.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Mr. Cody, thank you for your time.
You got it, Daniel. Hey, thank you for having me, and thank you to all your wonderful listeners.
Yes, people, Marty come and see you soon.